Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. Oh, one quick note also just on that. There is the art stage. So those of you who are interested to see that art area, just know he's actually got to leave early today. So he's got an early flight. So if you're interested, make sure you go and check that out at some point in one of the breaks. So next up, we've got a long-time entrepreneur, investor in the space, Dan Held. He's been around a long time. He's done various Bitcoin startups, working at Zero Block, blockchain.com, Interchange, Kraken, and a bunch of things. He's got lots of insights to share, and let's give it up for Dan Held.
All right, so I use this mic, not these ones, right? Either one? All right, I'll use this one. Okay, so the title of my presentation today is called Casino Games. You will get triggered. This will be a triggering presentation. So if you're easily offended, stick around and you're going to be offended. Okay, most of Bitcoin's adoption was through speculation. I know, we wish it was other things. We wish it was people using it to escape regimes, oppressive regimes. We wish it was people using it to buy things that were illegal because Bitcoin transactions are immutable. However, most Bitcoin adoption is through speculation. It's not a bad thing, though. In marketing, there's a term called a viral loop. A viral loop is a mechanism that creates growth. So how that works, think about it this way. Like if I refer you to take an Uber, you take an Uber and then you refer your friend and they refer a friend, that's a viral loop. Viral loops are a core mechanic of a lot of products and money. Bitcoin has the same mechanic. We get into Bitcoin, we tell our friends about it. Those friends also tell their friends about it, etc. And this is a representation of how that looks. So you've got speculation, price goes up, adoption, hashtag winning. Satoshi actually hypothesized that Bitcoin would be adopted in this manner. And he wrote this before Bitcoin was worth before Bitcoin was worth a penny. And I think it's really telling because Satoshi himself thought that Bitcoin's viral loop or speculative mechanic would lead to adoption. So Satoshi says, in this sense, it's more typical of a precious metal. Instead of supply changing to keep the value the same, the supply is predetermined and the value changes. As the number of users grows, the value per coin increases. It has the potential for a positive feedback loop. As users increase, the value goes up, which could attract more users to take advantage of the increasing value. A speculative loop. This isn't a bad thing. It's not speculation is not an evil thing. It's just inherent to human beings. We are animals after all. We're not these superior, these incredibly intelligent beings. We all speculate, whether it be in stocks, bonds, real estate, Bitcoin, etc. We all speculate and we all feel that fear and greed. And so this chart's a little bit outdated. I couldn't find an updated chart, but an updated chart would have the Coinbase users at over 100 million. So this is just in early 2021 is where we see that spike. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and crypto assets did not become magically more, they did not have magically more utility. They did not all of a sudden become much more useful. People just started to speculate. And we see that growth and that speculation drive growth across the board. And the first metric I want to show are user accounts. Now, unique users for blockchains are incredibly hard to pull because unique addresses aren't representative of unique people. But these are unique KYC'd accounts on Coinbase, which are directionally indicative of adoption and growth. As we see in the early, the 16 to 17 cycle, a huge leap forward, and this is cumulative users, by the way. A better chart would have been more of the growth rate, but this gives you a pretty clear picture. So we see most of this adoption occurring during speculative cycles. We also see fundraising increase exponentially during these cycles. As we can see, 2018, we can see it's hard to see on this chart, but it's a magnitude higher than 2016 and 2017. And then 2021 is even a magnitude higher than 2018. Things didn't become magically more, Bitcoin didn't become much more useful in 2021. It was due to a speculative cycle that led to more fundraising occurring. $25 billion in 2021. We also see this in liquidity. Through the speculative cycles, 2017, 2021, Bitcoin's liquidity gets deeper. And this is great because it can more and more market participants, including institutions, now can participate because these institutions might want to buy $1 billion or $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. Through these speculative cycles, Bitcoin adoption grows. But we also see this occurring too, across the board, across all these other crypto assets as well, not just Bitcoin. We also see Bitcoin core development. Now, these are commits. It's not exactly it's a directional indicator of people working on it. But in terms of Bitcoin core funding, I don't think we've ever been in a better spot than now. Lots of companies sponsor Bitcoin core developers. A lot of people personally sponsor Bitcoin core development. I'd say it's never been better in terms of funding. And then finally, Bitcoin's security model is dependent on speculative cycles occurring. As the price goes higher, more people speculate, more people start to move Bitcoin on chain, more transactions, which equals more fees, more security, which makes Bitcoin a better money. Bitcoin's long-term security model is dependent on more transactions occurring on the base layer. This is a very critical thing. We don't really have an issue with it for the next 10, 20 years or so, but in the next 10 or 20 years, demand for block space on the Bitcoin blockchain needs to occur, aka more transactions. Otherwise, we will potentially have a security budget problem. But we do not know, of course, what a proper level of security budget is. It's a super nuanced conversation, but more transactions equals more security, which is good. So a lot of people come for the speculation, but stay for the sound money. I mean, how many people here understood sound money before they got into Bitcoin, right? Like, it's not, a couple people might. I mean, there's definitely the Austrian folks. I studied finance in undergrad, so for me, it made sense. But a lot of people came from the speculative side. You're not a bad person. Look, you're just a human. You felt greed and FOMO because your buddy bought it, and that's how most people got into this space. And this is not a bad thing at all. This is just human nature and how it works. So let's get a little bit controversial here. Let's call Bitcoin spot trading. So spot is like just when you buy and sell the underlying assets of Bitcoin. Let's call that trading, so buying and selling it. Let's call that a casino game. So a casino game, for example, we'll call Bitcoin poker. Don't take this analogy too literally. I'm just using it as a way to talk about speculation. So Bitcoin's primary game is poker, but that's like the only game it has. Some of these other blockchains have other casino games. We might call NFTs blackjack, and yield farming slots, and lending, borrowing roulette, and staking being craps. Again, these analogies are not, you don't want to make these analogies one-to-one, but what's happening is that these games are attracting more people to like Solana and Ethereum, which is interesting. These speculative games are what draws people in. And so the games are working. For example, I went to NYC NFT conference and a few other NFT conferences, and they don't think in a Bitcoin standard, they think in an ETH standard. They bought an NFT for 0.1 ETH, and they flipped it for 0.4. It's a really interesting mechanic because Bitcoin's monetary policy is objectively a better money. Bitcoin, by any measure, is a better money, but it's through these speculative games that people are being introduced to the money. And so NFTs for Ethereum are very popular. Here's an example of Bored Apes and how they're priced in Ethereum. This isn't a dollar chart, it's an Ethereum chart. And so the NFT folks are thinking about money in an Ethereum standard, which is really interesting to see. And then, as we've seen here, here's the Ethereum BTC chart over time. As we've seen recently, the DeFi summer in 2021, we've seen kind of an increased, kind of a higher level where I think some of this is indicating, a lot of people playing these speculative games with NFTs and DeFi leads to kind of a permanent user base that sticks around. They came for the speculation, but some of them are staying for the, I would argue, poorer money. And so Basically with Bitcoin, when we think about it from a marketing perspective, how do we introduce people to Bitcoin? Well, we've all had the conversation where we try to convince our family and friends that the fiat standard is terrible and that, here's how central banking works and Bitcoin's great because you don't have to trust anyone. We're right, but that message is hard. I know we've all been with family and friends and or when you've been dating and you've brought this up and people look at you like you're kind of crazy, So speculative games are the primary way in which Bitcoin was adopted and also is a little bit more fun and a little bit more primitive. It's people's fear and greed that you tap into rather than a lengthy explanation of Austrian economics. So, at the end here, what I really want to leave everyone with is that through these speculative games, that is how Bitcoin was adopted. And I know people feel a little bit triggered with the word speculation because it feels like I'm minimizing Bitcoin or making it seem trivial. It's not. It's just human nature. And what I'm advocating for is bringing DeFi back to Bitcoin. NFTs started on Bitcoin. NFTs started on Rare Pepe started on Counterparty, which was on top of Bitcoin. We also had a lot of other things like Join Market. Join Market is actually the first DeFi product in the world. You can earn a yield. Yeah, Join Market is an awesome tool. And by the way, shout out to, I think it's Dorier and a few others who are working on Jam, which is a better GUI for it. But that is earning yield on providing your coins to be mixed with others. That's an example of one of the first DeFi products on Bitcoin. I would argue Lightning is DeFi as well. I think this is great, bringing more things back to Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is a phenomenal, pristine piece of collateral. It is the best money that we have in the world, and some of these DeFi projects can bring back these games back to Bitcoin, and I believe that will bring more adoption. So, that's what I really want to leave everyone with. I think that's the last slide. Here's the last slide. Yeah. So, speculation isn't a dirty word. We need to embrace human nature and let the games begin. I appreciate everyone listening. Hope you didn't get too triggered, but thank you. Cheers.
Any questions for Dan? I'll do it running. Do you want to go on the lectern? I'll run around. Any questions for Dan? Okay. Well, I suppose we'll leave it there then. Thank you, Dan. Everyone. Thanks, Dan. So we're actually a little bit early, so we'll just wait until the next panel's ready. So 5-10 minutes. Hello. Okay, we're back. So, thanks for waiting. We've got our next panel. I'll let Marty Bent introduce everyone. So everyone, welcome Marty up.
All right, we're here to talk about the Bitcoin economy, the circular economy. We've got 4 individuals who are building in the space to stoke that circular economy. Why don't you join me up here? We've got Nicolas Dorier from BTC Pay Server, Max Keaton from Hodl and Debify, Desiree Dickerson from Thunder Games, and Samson from Jan 3. Yeah, the circular economy, it's a big topic. It's something that is a big meme in the space. How do we stoke this circular economy? How do we get people actually using Bitcoin and deriving the utility that the network and the stack being built on top of it provides? How do people get onboarded in unique ways without maybe buying Bitcoin directly? And we'll start with you, Nicolas, building BTC Pay Server. I mean, I think we all know why you started BTC Pay Server. There's a very infamous tweet out there, but how do you view this open source project enabling individuals to get into the Bitcoin economy?
So I would say BTC Pay Server for a very new individual that discovered Bitcoin is it's a few steps early, I guess. I think when more people want to be introduced to the Bitcoin economy, they need first to learn how to receive and send Bitcoin. It's the simplest thing ever. And I think my project BTC Pay Server is nice for when people are already a certain level of education about this. And in BTC Pay Server, we're really looking for this type of person or local community or like a small business that can kind of handhold like a local merchants to learn about Bitcoin, because as I said, like the learning curve, even if technically speaking it's easy to click on to install your own BTC Pay Server, there's lots of things in Bitcoin to learn about. Maybe most of you forgot about it because now you breathe Bitcoin, but there's still lots of roadblocks on this.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you before we came on stage here, I think that's probably a good framing to it. It's probably for somebody who's already understands Bitcoin and just wants to leverage a better accounting software, not accounting software, but invoicing software. I've been using BTC Pay Server for 4 years, and it's incredible to see just how far it's come since day one and what it enables. And that's, as a BTC Pay Server user, I can't recommend it enough because it's just worked for us year in and year out. Like I was talking to Max, Hodl, disclaimer, sponsor of the podcast, invoice via BTC Pay Server, and it's, for me personally, it's enabled my business to adopt like a pretty significant Bitcoin standard. Like I've said this on the podcast. I think this year 80% of our revenues will be in sats, and most of them will be running through our BTC Pay Server. So thank you for building it. And then as a business, we get the Bitcoin and we have it on our balance sheet, and it's like, what can we do with it? And you made a big announcement yesterday, Max, with Debify. You can use that Bitcoin as collateral to go do things with it. So how do you view Bitcoin as collateral, enabling people to leverage things in the digital economy?
Well, yeah, my thesis is basically that for the next 10 years we will see Bitcoin like becoming, evolutioning from trading asset to collateral asset. But of course it's also about payments, gaming, nation state adoption, and all those things. Well, I think if you already have Bitcoin, then it's probably, most probably, if you know and you understand the value of the Bitcoin and all the options and features of Bitcoin, you don't want to sell it. Like you don't want to sell it. And one of the best tools how to preserve financial stability yet not sell your Bitcoin is basically borrow against that. And the great thing about Bitcoin is, I was speaking about this yesterday, that it's actually programmable money, and you can figure out many different schemes, ownership schemes, including non-custodial borrowing and lending. And this will allow you to have some control over your funds, and this will allow you to borrow or not to sell Bitcoin. And actually, that's the great part. So you're kind of still being an owner of your own assets, but you're also not selling it and borrowing against that and using this for like funding your business, running your business, or doing whatever you want. Like, of course, majority of people still use collateral for Bitcoin for a collateral in order to buy more Bitcoin. That's the main use case. But I think like in next years, the variation of use cases will grow. People will start using it more and more, including for improving cash flows and security reasons and all that stuff. I mean, financial security reasons. So I think the adoption of collateral will only grow. Hopefully, we are moving from the stage where the contingent stuff already probably finished, and hopefully people will understand that it's not a problem of Bitcoin, all these issues with lending platform, it's a problem of third parties that were built on top of Bitcoin.
And then, Des, what I really like about Thunder Games is sort of like a roundabout way to get people who may not be into Bitcoin yet into Bitcoin and onboarded via a unique vehicle, which is gaming. So how do you view what you guys are doing to get people into the Bitcoin economy?
Yeah, and my talk earlier, it was, we think about games, specifically mobile games, as like a launch pad for people, one, having their first exposure to Bitcoin in a safe, simple, secure, and fun way, but then also presenting them opportunities of like what to do with their Bitcoin. So, we are non-custodial and wallet agnostic, so presenting them with ways to like take that Bitcoin and go from there. So for instance, I was chatting with Marty, was one of the great ways is like, okay, you can cash out to Breeze, for instance, and Breeze has an amazing like podcasting platform. So you can win sats on Thunder, cash out to Breeze, and tip podcasters on the Breeze app, which I think is really cool and creates this like tiny little lightning economy, which is I think is really important and something we think about. And one of my favorite ways that we kind of do this like little lightning economy is we have a lot of people who create content for us. We're small, and I am our marketing arm, and I have a lot of other things to do. And so our community has started making a ton of memes and writing tweets and just creating all this amazing content that we generate value from. And one of the things I hate is that, I can't like pay them, like can't add them as a salaried employee. So I've just started tipping them with sats, and like microtransactions make that possible. And we actually have a product that we're coming out with here soon that make it possible, to kind of include this in games, where it's like, hey, you're creating content for our game economy, like we're going to make it possible where I can just tip you directly. So I think that's what's really cool is like, the new experience, like people are experiencing life like in this hybrid physical virtual world now, and so now we can start like paying people for the work and for the value that they create in the virtual world as well. And like we're just experimenting in the gaming space, and it's all super fun, but I think it can kind of stem from there, and we can change like traditional finance in general and just like the traditional ways in which society operates. So I think gaming is like this little tiny ecosystem we can experiment a lot with.
Yeah. And then Samson, you're going after pretty big fish with nation states at Gen 3. What impact do you think convincing more and more governments to either adopt Bitcoin or adopt laws that are welcoming to Bitcoin, what can that do for the Bitcoin economy in the long run?
Well, there's a number of benefits. I think one is you can preempt bad decision making. So if you look at Europe, there's a series of bad decisions that's led to the current situation. I was going to make a meme, like a Venn diagram, like trying to ban hardware wallets, ban non-custodial wallets, trying to ban proof of work, and then energy crisis is like Europe. But going out there and engaging with nation states, engaging with politicians and governments, the hope is that get better. Thank you. All right. Thanks. So let me see. if you can engage with the governments ahead of time, they may be able to put some better policies. They can incentivize mining, incentivize miners to build energy infrastructure for their own mining, and in the case of dire need like now, they could also shut off and pour energy back into the grid. But I see like El Salvador is leading the way. They've done a really important thing, which is made Bitcoin legal tender. So that's effectively saying Bitcoin is money. It's not so much about the legal tender aspect. It's more of an endorsement at the nation state level saying Bitcoin is money, and we're back to a sane world where money can be money. The alternative is money is a surveillance tool, and that's where you get the banning non-custodial, not banning having your own wallet, right? That's basically insanity, like not allowing you to have possession of your own money. And then you get the situation like in Lebanon where you have to hold up to the bank to get your own money out of the bank for important reasons, right? For a medical surgery for your father or something like that. So I see that as an initiative to kind of approach it from a high level, but at the same time, you need the grassroots. You need getting sats into people's hands, like through games or through stores, merchant adoption, lending, all this stuff. So I think it all plays together. And of course, there's criticism, like why do you want to help a government get Bitcoin? But the alternative is you get proof of work bans or wallet bans or things like that.
Yeah, now, especially on the mining side, I think there's a really interesting path forward for any either individual states. I'm focused in the United States, really trying to convince an individual state with energy resources to spin up a Bitcoin mining permanent fund, similar to the volcano bond. Maybe you issue a municipal bond, raise cash, and you use that cash to buy a ASICs partner with a miner, and they go and they find an abandoned well, and they put some generators on it, mine Bitcoin, pay back the bondholders, and then roll some excess profits into a permanent fund. Where in the United States, the big problem between the states and the federal government is the federal government dangles money in front of them and says, hey, you better do this or we're not going to give you your money. But Bitcoin, particularly Bitcoin mining, enables this path forward where you can create these permanent funds, you can build that up, and the next time the federal government comes to you, it's like, hey, you're not going to get this money if you don't do what we say. The state can just say, hey, we actually don't need your money. Bitcoin's enabling us to build our own isolated economy in our state. It was a tangent from the moderator, but I think that tangent and what you guys are building highlights unique capabilities that Bitcoin provides the world that the traditional incumbent financial monetary system does not. So what are you guys seeing out there in terms of what you're building, what you're doing, that really highlights Bitcoin as uniquely suited to do something that the traditional system cannot?
So I have a very precise situation where I cannot use anything else than Bitcoin in my situation. So in Japan, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we created like the BTC Server Foundation, which was kind of the first foundation in this space to try to create a structure to easily accept donation from corporate and redistribute it to contributor to our own projects. And the thing is that it's an open source project, so like people come from everywhere in the world, including some countries that, so it's located in Tokyo, and so it's some people living in countries that the bank don't even know how to properly spell the name, or like they don't even know the name of the country. So when I try to send some funds to some contributors via the banking system in Japan, doing that internationally is a process that takes, for each wire transfer you want to take, it takes around 30 minutes of paperwork time. You need at first at home like to print a paper, bring this paper to the bank, enter in a cubicle where you are remotely connected to an employee, then scan the paper. And then after you have like an interrogation of 15 minutes to be sure you are not a terrorist, why you're sending this money. Then they look at your invoice, they see one line they don't like, oh, you're reimbursing a person, why are you reimbursing the person? You say, hey, that went fun. They say, oh no, you cannot do that. So yeah, all kind of problem. So we have, right now we have 10 contributors around 10 contributors. So if I wanted to pay all of them, it would take like 30 minutes by 10. So yeah, half a day, 5 hours doing this bullshit. So in our case, like now the foundation receive Bitcoin, and we pay Bitcoin to the contributor directly, just because there is no other way. Like there is simply no other way. It's I never think about that it was a circular economy in this sense, but definitely it is, and like only Bitcoin can do this.
Bitcoin is super collateral. How is it different than typical collateral that is used throughout the system?
Well, how is different from other collateral assets? Well, first of all, in terms of from the perspective of lender, if there's liquidation, for example, if you have a real estate as a collateral, it takes you months or maybe years to sell it and to get cash. Usually it's also the period when real estate usually falls down in price. Well, that happens in Bitcoin pretty fast, of course, but with Bitcoin you can actually sell your collateral instantly. So this is one of the reasons. Another reason, as I told you already, it's a programmable money. And another thing, you can actually, you can create several ownership systems in terms of like if you have non-custodial setup, and lender will be in charge to some extent, borrower will be in charge to some extent, and for example, like we do in existing lending platform Lend, and there's a platform in charge to some extent. It also creates a full transparency. And the great thing also about Bitcoin is I know that not many people are fans of transparency in terms of Bitcoin, and I appreciate that, and I support that with all our projects. But if you want to borrow money, you can easily prove that you actually have assets. Like there's guys, Haseki app, who are doing this now, and I think this industry will only evolve. So you don't need to go with your salary, bank statements, whatever. You just show easily, digitally, remotely. You show that you have assets in order to borrow against these assets. And you can almost instantly borrow money. So there's a lot of different things, but I think the most important are that you can easily sell Bitcoin. It's basically 24/7 trading. You can easily distribute the keys to your collateral, and you can easily be transparent. And you can also actually follow, like with non-custodial, if the escrow is created on Bitcoin blockchain, you can double check always. You can monitor what's happening on your escrow. So there's no funds movement and your funds are not being rehypothecated. So these are the most important properties in terms of collateral for Bitcoin.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you already touched on what this can do for gaming in terms of like, enabling micropayments and inciting the circular economy a little bit. But in terms of like the culture of gaming, how do you see Bitcoin beginning to like seek into that and really? 'Cause that's like one thing. Let's be honest. For the first 13 years, it's just been a bunch of us nerds trying to like push Bitcoin into the culture. Like, and gaming is obviously a massive industry right now. Do you see this as a Trojan horse for the Bitcoin economy?
Oh yeah, and that's, you know, gaming or Bitcoin can do a ton for gaming, not just like people winning real world value in games. It's, you know, I think it's interesting because one, yeah, like gaming companies just make money off of us, hand over fist. It's you buy the console, you buy the game, you buy the monthly subscription, you buy the in-game content, you create UGC for this company. It's just a one-way value sink. And there's a lot of like interesting stuff too in terms of like being an indie studio or a developer. It's, you know, you are really kind of at the will of these distributors. I mean, we are constantly being taken out of the App Store and out of Google Play and fighting that battle. And also, you know, one of our monetization methods is through ad revenue, and we are at the will of the ad companies, and we don't get paid for 90 days. So when we make money, we don't see that money for 90 days. And Bitcoin can totally circumvent not only these walled gardens of these distributors that we hate, like fuck Google, fuck Apple, like, I mean, it's just madness, but like we have to play by their rules now, but Bitcoin really has the potential to circumvent that. But then in terms of just the community aspect, that's where I think gaming really has, or Bitcoin has the biggest aspect, is actually bringing Bitcoin to the people who need it most. And that's what we really think a lot about at Thunder is, you know, mobile games are so big because there's a low barrier to entry in terms of price point. But so many people are playing games. 63% of women worldwide play mobile games, and 60% of those women play every single day. I said this earlier. And so if we can use mobile games as a way to bring Bitcoin to a female audience, similarly with like emerging markets, 66, or mobile games industry is going to reach $66 billion by 2026, and around like 45% of that growth is projected to be attributable to the APAC region. So again, you know, mobile games, if more and more people are playing mobile games, if we can introduce Bitcoin to them through these mobile games, like this is how we're going to reach mass adoption. And again, emerging markets, female audiences, these are traditionally underserved audiences when it comes to financial access and empowerment, and specifically Bitcoin. So if we can use mobile games, although it's fun, it is a very, very serious and powerful tool for introducing Bitcoin to the world.
And then, Samson, for you, like what can the Bitcoin economy do? Obviously, people think Bitcoin and nation states should have this naturally combative relationship, but could you make an argument that Bitcoin can provide a lot of utility to nation states just via the nature of the asset?
Sure. Earlier you said it's like the first 13 years it's a bunch of nerds pushing Bitcoin into the mainstream. It's still the case, and it's still going to be that way for a while. But yeah, there's the definite benefit. Like if nation states put Bitcoin in their treasury, they can actually combat things like inflation, right? They can tap into energy reserves, mine Bitcoin, and pay people. So a lot of it, I think, is just educating them on why Bitcoin would benefit them. And that's also a way to prevent against badly thought out regulations, right? Just align the incentives, just like Bitcoin aligns incentives for end users and normal people. But align their incentives that, you know, if you start mining Bitcoin, or let's say you do a Bitcoin bond, you can actually fund infrastructure projects, you know, keep people warm in the winter, things like that that are really cool. But overall, I think it's really just educating and letting them know that Bitcoin is the future, and you probably want to get on board early, right? There's an interesting thing that could happen sometime in the next couple of years, which is one country with a fiat currency just starts printing the shit out of their fiat currency and buying Bitcoin with it. And if you're the first one to do that, then you can accumulate a massive stack of Bitcoin before everyone else catches on. So that's a fun thing to think about.
Pierre's speculative attack is, it needs to happen.
Yeah, I have a small question also for you. Is in the different argument that you can make to convince like those nation states to adopt Bitcoin, one of them is like saying just fuck you to the IMF.
So what was the question?
When you ask when you try to convince nation states to adopt Bitcoin, is when you tell them fuck you to the IMF, is it a good argument for them?
Well, generally you don't need to tell them. Like a lot of countries already kind of want to do that anyways. But I think a lot of politicians are invested in short-term interests, right? They're very high time preference. They want to get reelected, or they want to show something right away. And IMF money is quick, easy money that you can borrow and you can do something and show people something, right? But that's the challenge. Like they have a lot of influence because they wield a lot of fiat currency. And that's very tempting. And that's why I think El Salvador is very interesting, because they're willing to go for benefits in the long term, but you know, they might suffer in the short term because they're going to get beat down by the IMF, and the ratings agencies are going to trash them. But it's going to pay off in the long term, and I think we just have to wait. Just like when Bitcoin's in a bear market, you know, we all look kind of dumb, but when it's mooning, then we look very smart.
I think stat I saw a few months ago is Argentina specifically has taken something like 53 loans out from the IMF for the last 60 years, and their annual inflation rate is literally like 110% over that 50-year period. So it just highlights that the IMF isn't really helping these countries at all, particularly Argentina.
So it seems to me that the countries that are more likely to adopt Bitcoin and have a long-term view are like the country where the current politicians are quite popular and have a good chance to be re-elected, so that they can see like over time like people being impacted by their policy and kind of reap the benefit of that. Seems.
Well, I would say it's like a litmus test. If a government or politicians are going for a Bitcoin standard, that means they're in it for the long run. They're in it for long-term prosperity of their nation, not just short-term re-election, get paid. So I think it's a way to see like where are their intentions really lying. So that's a benefit of Bitcoin. It just shines a light.
And I just want to throw this out there because just from my experience of running a Bitcoin company that accepts Bitcoin for payment, and then focusing more on the podcasting 2.0 nature, which leverages KeySend on the Lightning Network, where somebody boosts the podcast as they're listening. It's income to my business, but the way I set it up with the splits, I get 50%, I get 40%, Mac gets 40%, Car gets 5%, or developer gets 5%. So as a business, we're getting paid for our work, but I'm actually not paying Matt, I'm not paying Car, I'm not paying DJ for the splits. It's going directly to them. And so just thinking as a business owner, like how does that change the way like taxes work and stuff like that? So technically, like the business didn't get any income, it went directly to us. So you're building these open structures where the money's flowing directly to the person doing the work, and the business actually never touches it on their balance sheet in some instances if you leverage something like KeySend. So just thinking structurally how this stack is beginning to change just like business operations and how that affects taxes and stuff like that.
It's interesting, like it's kind of one thing that Lightning can do, and like what you're mentioning, like lots of people in Lightning think about making like small payments like in your commercial stuff like this, but I think one thing that is undervalued is that the concept of payment stream, and it's a bit what you are doing, like people making very small payment and becoming automatically redirected, and the people to who it's redirected might be also automatically redirected somewhere. It's kind of a concept of payment stream. And yeah, I think we are like maybe 10 years or 20 years away from having a meaningful regulation coming from that, but like somebody has to start and showing the way and like start thinking out after, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can imagine a structure if this gets fully fleshed out and is successful. Like we can get so granular. I know like Jeremy Rubin's working on covenants at the protocol layer, and who knows whether or not they get introduced, but certainly a Lightning with KeySend, like, is there a possibility where like the business actually doesn't hold money ever outside of like their ongoing expenses they need to keep in reserve, and you pay out employees, shareholders, whatever, automatically as they're getting paid?
I would love to see like get paid from ad networks, like literally streamed. But it's like okay, like you're getting one sat for like someone interacting with an interstitial ad, and like we could split that up. I mean, it was more than one sat, and share the revenue with our users. Like that would be like insane if it just went to a prize pool. Like obviously it's not possible now, but we're getting there. I mean, I think what what Samson said earlier was important. Is like the ad networks have blocked all Bitcoin stuff previously. So I personally just call them up or email them or message them on LinkedIn, like hundreds of people, until someone will just listen about Bitcoin and why this isn't bad. And like I think we've like turned over like 10 or 12 ad networks, which is like really great. And so like I think people see the potential. Like that would be a game changer for us. Like I think it would definitely benefit our business if we weren't like reporting so much of the income to the business itself.
Yes. So the splitting of income is interesting. paying people with Bitcoin is interesting, and then tipping is interesting too. I think where this is going is that Bitcoin has allowed us to change a lot of ways that companies do business or interact with their users and their employees. Technically, with Lightning, you could pay people daily. You don't have to pay them at the end of the month or bi-monthly. But the bigger implication is, how does taxation work? Because now you have this parallel system, a new form of money that you can opt into. You're not locked into the fiat rails. You're not locked into using the banking system or collecting the money first and redistributing it. So it makes taxation much more difficult. The question is, where is everything going when governments want to collect their tax revenue? Because this actually breaks a lot of that model. Even things like capital controls are now technically obsolete. Even though some countries are still trying to enforce capital controls, they technically don't exist anymore, right? So Korea is one of them. They have capital controls, but at the same time you don't, because Bitcoin and crypto. But I think it's going to change the competition for people, for nation states, like attracting talent, attracting people to move to live in your country. And they have to basically treat people better. And I think that's a good thing. It's a tertiary benefit of Bitcoin, I believe. So if you look at Bitcoin City, it's almost it's a special economic zone. Basically, no tax on anything except for VAT. But I think you could also see some shift down the road where countries just do tax property, because that's really what you provide. You provide the land. You don't really own it, even though you can own it, but you don't really own it. And then it's obviously linked. Like if you live there or you own it, then you can pay tax on that. And I think that's a much more clear system than trying to become an intermediary through the fiat currency and try to insert yourself in different parts of the economy, because then you spend months, weeks probably, doing your taxes and trying to sort stuff out every year. And like Nicolas is saying, it's a lot of time, right? And we could be doing better things with that time. So I think overall, the trend is going to be towards simplification, just because the technology has changed the entire paradigm so much.
It's kind of, so for those that didn't read this book, the Sovereign Individual, it's a bit of the point that you're making, indeed, that technology is changing the way or like the structure of power, and so like it would change the way of how people get taxed, and so one of the things that the book predicts is more and more power to nation, to small nation cities, basically. And yeah, it's interesting to see. The only thing, if Bitcoin reach full maturity and full utopian objective, I would say, like the only thing that states can tax will be the land, and I think everything will derive from this. And I think it makes total sense, because at the end of the day, like the concept of state is inherently like geographical. So I think I think it's good things.
And then, Max, thinking about what you're working on at DeviFi, I think particularly the nature of multi-sig and how risk-averse large banks or financial institutions are. The nature of multi-sig makes it so these institutions are almost incentivized to collaborate and distribute risks across each other, which creates these new business models and interactions that haven't existed before.
Yeah, the best part is, well, we touched briefly about taxation as well, but the good part is also when you borrow, it's non-taxable events in many countries, actually. So for Bitcoiner, there's only incentives in order to borrow against the Bitcoin. But as you mentioned, yeah, that's a different model for banks, different mindset. The good part is actually is not only they will be forced to some extent to learn to use, like, I think more secure model rather than being fully custodial. But the best part in non-custodial setup is that they will be able to directly interact with the borrower, and they will be able directly to receive all interest payment without middlemen. Because now many banks that are willing to tap into Bitcoin lending market, they need to go through intermediaries, custodial lending platform. So they provide them liquidity, and these platforms, they actually distribute this liquidity among their borrowers, but they charge for that. With the setup that we are planning to offer, they will be able directly to reach the borrower and directly receive whole all interest payments in their pocket. So it's not only more secure, more transparent, but it's also more profitable for banks to start lending money directly to the borrower, to the end borrower, instead of going through intermediaries.
We've got 2 minutes left, and I just want to throw it to the four of you. Like we've talked about what's been built and what can be enabled already, but what are you guys excited for on the horizon in terms of things that may be coming to the Bitcoin stack that will enable this economy even further?
So on my side, I'm not working directly on this, but I think I already mentioned I want to see happening and start happening. It's the concept of payment stream that is really like having a flow of payment going from people and like not having to bother about every time taking a specific decision. Okay, I want to send this amount of money. Like having this concept of payment stream that only Lightning allows.
Yeah, we're also not working on this, but I'm excited in particular about DLCs, discrete log contracts, because like if you're a lending platform, you can use DLCs in order to build oracles for allowing you to show a proper liquidation price or LTV ratio for your loans. So this is kind of what I'm fascinated, what's coming or what's developing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I will actually echo that. I am super excited for DLCs, especially in the gaming space. I love that. I'm also just so inspired being here. Like the last time I felt like this much building and this much new stuff was at the Lightning conference. And so it's really cool to see so much, you know, like Fetty. There's just like so many cool things being built. But I also did like want to touch on like the taxes. I did pay my DC taxes this year. So if, you know, Mario Bells is watching, I'm good. So yeah.
Should have been advising Michael Saylor. Let's see, what am I excited about? Well, we've been working on a relaunch of Aqua. That's the Bitcoin and Liquid wallet that we started at Blockstream and now is being built at Jan 3. But hopefully we can push that out in the next month or two. But it's a really simple wallet. It's Bitcoin, Liquid Bitcoin, and a focus for it is also on Liquid Tether. So there was a panel upstairs on emerging markets, and OB was also shilling Liquid Tether, because Liquid Tether is actually really cool, and you guys are using it heavily. It's the only stablecoin that cannot be frozen, because liquid confidential transactions, etc. So the plan for Aqua is that we're going to push it heavily in the global south, emerging markets, and I think it's probably the only Bitcoin wallet that's going to feature prominently a stablecoin. And I think we've ceded a lot of territory to the shitcoins, because they've embraced it, and you know, all the shitcoin wallets have stablecoins on all the different chains, but there's no Bitcoin wallet yet that's featured heavily stablecoin. And we've integrated or integrating Liquid Taxi from Volplum Ventures, from Tiero and his guys. So the cool thing about Aqua is if you're in Latin America or Argentina where you need a stablecoin, you don't actually need to get the Bitcoin first. You can just take a Liquid Tether payment to your wallet and then pay the fees in Liquid Tether too. So I think it's going to maybe shift the tide a bit and get more things into Bitcoin. And I think over the next months and years, we're going to see that shift happening with TDEX that was announced here yesterday, with Debify and everything else that's being built.
Awesome. Well, Nicolas, Max, Des, Samson, thank you for your time. It's been incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was a fantastic panel. I really enjoyed that one. So next up, we've got the man behind Bitcoin is Venice. He's a writer in the space. He has been an investor in the space also. He is also writing and putting out a lot of interesting content. I'm excited to see what he's got. So everyone, please welcome Alan Farington.
All right, thank you very much. Just by the way, due to a technical mishap, I'm going to have to stay at the podium, but I would kind of like you all to see my t-shirt because it's been under wraps for a while. I ordered this about 3 months ago and debuted it today. Unfortunately, you probably can't see it again. But anyway, yes, so today I am going to be talking about Bitcoin and Islamic finance. So I think that this has become a bit of a meme. And it's partly, if not largely, my fault for championing this idea, but I've realized over the past maybe 1 or 2 years that even though this is often referenced, I think it's very rarely really discussed. And at the same time, there's a lot of misconceptions around what Islamic finance really is in the first place. I think the most common of which is probably that it's just regular Western finance, except you aren't allowed debt. And if there's a single bad idea that I want to try to kill today on the record, I think it's this one. This sort of simple enough, kind of innocent seeming enough idea it is wrong in just about every way. So I think not only does such a simple comparison do a great disservice to what is really quite a rich school of thought, but even the sort of superficial assessment of debt itself is kind of inaccurate, as we'll see. But who am I to be getting up here and talking about this in the first place? Well, until fairly recently, I worked in TradFi. I'm actually now setting up a Bitcoin business that I'm hoping to launch and sort of publicize soon, but to which all of this is highly, highly relevant. So I know we're not really supposed to do promotions in these talks, and I don't really have anything to promote yet anyway, but if this is also of commercial interest to you, please do come and talk to me about it. And if anyone, if you're watching this online, if you're not in Riga just now or later, I should say too, that's my Twitter handle. My DMs are open. I would love to hear from you. I'm also not Muslim. I think this is definitely worth mentioning up front. I mean, firstly, just for the sake of kind of honesty and transparency. I mean, I'm sure some of you are wondering, given how niche a topic this is. But nothing I say has any kind of theological weight behind it, right? I'm not preaching. I'm not trying to convey any kind of authority just beyond my own intellectual interest. And if anything, that is what I want to try to instill in all of you today. I think that you too should be intellectually interested in this because it provides a centuries-old, already worked out alternative to what we might call fiat finance, and which I think aligns remarkably well with Bitcoin. So I'm going to cover 3 tenets of Islamic finance, which I've helpfully reduced to slogans for you, and which I think will probably work pretty well as memes as well. And I'm focusing, as you can see, on the contrast to fiat finance. And I just want to be clear that this is not remotely exhaustive. It's not supposed to be. It's more of like a layman's introduction, the point of which is to convince you that this is highly dissimilar to the fiat that we know and hate, and similar to the Bitcoin that we know and love. So I'm going to talk about risk sharing, not risk transfer, use, not financialization, and the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. So Islamic finance is remarkably astute on the risks associated with entrepreneurship. You could even say that it mandates humility in the face of economic uncertainty, because the idea that you can know what is going to happen is not just impossible in a kind of Hayekian sense or foolish, just in terms of common sense. It's blasphemous. So only God knows all. And so for you to act as if you know what is going to happen is seen as unethical. So given you can't know what is going to happen, you have to make an informed decision, and you have to take responsibility for it. So even if you don't claim to know what is going to happen, if you nonetheless stand to benefit no matter what happens, you are seen as having unacceptably disregarded a personal responsibility to take the risks that are necessary to earn those rewards. So you don't have to take any responsibility, but if you want an uncertain reward, that can only follow from skin in the game. Oh, sorry, that should have been there before. So what does this mean in practice? Well, this background is necessary to appreciate where the prohibition on income from fixed interest debt comes from. And it's a lot more sophisticated, let's say, than just saying no debt. So if you lend to a business and you intend for your payback to come from interest payments before dispersal to shareholders and before reinvestment, you will get paid no matter what. It doesn't matter whether the business does well or poorly. it doesn't matter who is taking what risks, what responsibilities, making what decisions, you will be paid back. And so this is perceived as risk transfer. That's not supposed to happen. It doesn't really say that much anyway. Hopefully it will come back on soon. So yeah, this is perceived as risk transfer. So between those who are contributing capital to the business, yeah, there we go. The risk is being transferred from one group to another rather than being shared. Now, you might think that this is just incredibly naive. You know, why not have credit markets with, again, it doesn't say that much. Why not have credit markets with consenting and informed participants? And I have a lot of sympathy for this. For what it's worth, I do think that there will be credit markets on a Bitcoin standard. I think that actually could be an entirely separate talk. But what I would also put to you is that I think rejecting this out of hand is equally, does that say the right thing? Yeah, is equally naive because it ignores how blatantly unethical a great deal of debt-based finance is. If you have to have a real stake in the uncertain enterprise that you're investing in, there would be no zombie companies, there would be no private equity, there would probably be considerably less global, impersonal capital, and a great deal more local, interested, involved capitalists who are sharing the risks of their joint endeavors. So interest is useful in quotation marks, primarily because it lets you price risk efficiently. But what the lens of Islamic finance allows you to see is that this also has downsides. Do you really want to be able to price something that you know nothing about and in which you have no real stake? Do you want the incentive of finance to be first and foremost exploitative? And just for the purpose of avoiding future legal liability, I have no idea who this individual is. I just Googled old mean banker, and this is the first thing that came up. So maybe, look, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Again, I'm not trying to be a prude, I'm not preaching, but my very strong suggestion would be that Bitcoin is going to make this decision for you. Because zombie companies and private equity are only possible in the first place because of the mechanism of money creation that prevails under fractional reserve and central banking. So another way of putting this is that financial exploitation is going to become a lot more difficult, which means that risk transfer is going to become a lot more difficult too. If you had a sound money that appreciated at the aggregate rate of reinvested return on capital, why would you risk it for a fixed upside? If you no longer needed to chase yield to preserve your purchasing power, and if you no longer needed to misallocate capital, why not take some responsibility for allocating it well instead? Why not share the risks and share the rewards? Now, you might think that zombie companies and private equity are kind of weird niches within finance for me to decide to be mad about. But I think really they're only the most salacious in terms of irresponsibility and exploitation. And in fact, when you dig into it, almost everything that follows from debt-based finance, I believe, has similar characteristics. So another rule of Islamic finance is an interesting one around how collateral works, which aligns with avoiding exploitation and taking responsibility. And it's really hard to visually communicate the concept of collateral, by the way. I don't know if anyone even got that. So in Islamic finance, if you have an investment that is collateralized, you cannot retain possession of the collateral until you have fulfilled your liability. So I could borrow from you, and I could give you like a gold bracelet, say, as collateral, but I would have to actually give it to you, right? I can't keep it. And if I don't pay you back, then you keep it. And prior to that, or per whatever the terms of the contract are, you can't sell it either, because that is rehypothecation, which is effectively fraud because you are avoiding a personal responsibility. So you originally said that you would do something that you knew you could do, but then subsequently behaved in such a way that means you don't actually know if you can do that anymore or not. Now, this might all seem pretty trivial, but I gave an example where both the personal incentives and the financial terms are super easy to understand. In fact, this has far wider implications than what's basically just a pawn shop. It means that you can't have mortgages, for example, because a mortgage is collateralized by the house that the borrower possesses while they are paying off the loan. And there's a John Mulaney joke, which I will obviously now butcher, where he says, I bought a house. Well, no, the bank bought a house, but they're letting me live in it, which is super nice of them. And forgive me for feeling the need to explain the joke, right? But this is funny because he's drawing attention not only to how widespread and how normalized this activity is, but also this way of talking about the activity that obscures what is really going on. So criticizing something that's so widespread and so normalized might seem bizarre, but again, what Islamic finance does is give us a lens to see the downsides, and there are many. Mortgages are predicated on future income streams that you can't possibly know anything about. It's a promise that you have no idea that you can keep, but that also constrains your ability to act because all the risk has been transferred to you. If you can't handle the risk, you lose everything. You get kicked out of your house, you have nowhere to live, potentially while still in debt for it as well. And then finally, rather than making housing affordable and accessible for all, as a typical fiat propaganda would go, this directly contributes to monetizing housing. And it's not just that housing becomes a de facto store of value, it's even more literally true than this, given the house becomes the collateral for the credit asset of your unknowable future income on which the liability of new money is brought into existence. So it's a lot more than just private equity and zombie companies. It's virtually all personal finance, fiat personal finance, I should say, and it's a decent chunk of commercial banking as well. So Bitcoin fixes this technically, but Islamic finance fixes this ethically, because your relationship to the risk and the value of productive assets has to be in their use. Or I think to be more accurate, it's just not even conceivable per any activity that is ethical for exactly that reason. And some of you have probably jumped ahead and realized this already, but where this is all going is that you can't print money. It violates just about every ethical tenet so far described. It requires a guaranteed payment that you have no way of knowing is possible and no way of taking any real responsibility for. It's economically equivalent to rehypothecating the collateral, and so it contrives wealth from baseless promises rather than from real work. The aversion to financialization in Islamic finance comes from the pretty straightforward idea that there ought to be a one-to-one relationship between a financial instrument and the underlying real economy asset. The more this ratio diverges, the less real finance becomes, and the more we end up building a house of cards that will surely one day collapse. Now, obviously, Bitcoin doesn't work this way technically, but I'm hopeful that I don't really see any reason for it to work this way socially either. Prior to being more obviously money day to day, I think that the clearest ways that we're going to see, or that it will be evidence what Bitcoin's financial characteristics are each of the following. So lightning channels, in which there is no financial instrument because it is being used, or as a kind of pristine collateral for a more involved financial transaction. But in which case, clearly, you will have to hand over the Bitcoin. If we've learned anything from the incomprehensibly stupid DeFi, CeFi implosion, it's that the promise of a Bitcoin is not a Bitcoin, right? Only a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, and there's no nonsense of it being wrapped or of total value locked or of yield, right? So the yield is the friends we made along the way. But the Bitcoin is and only is actual Bitcoin. Not financialized, but used. So one of the reasons that it's tricky to pin down exactly what Islamic finance is that the idea of setting it side by side with fiat finance and kind of comparing and contrasting sort of doesn't make any sense in the first place. Islamic finance isn't a list of what objectively is and isn't allowed. It's a framework for deducing what should and shouldn't be allowed based on certain ethical principles. Now, as with credit markets and as with mortgages, you might reasonably think, well, what good is a well-spirited law if you can't objectively tell what the law says? But again, Islamic finance encourages us to ask back, what good is a well-lettered law if what it is telling us to do is blatantly unethical? And I want to be really clear about this so I'm not, I guess, accused of being kind of rhetorically overzealous. It's not that there is no letter of the law. There clearly is, and I've referred to it several times already. It's more that the letter of the law is not the focus. The core point, the core tenet, what matters more than anything else is the spirit of the law, and that is how the letter of the law is derived, as opposed to vice versa. So if you want an even snappier slogan, I guess you could maybe say ethics, not efficiency. And again, I'm not preaching, but I think if you entertain the ethics in question, you'll find that they align with Bitcoin remarkably well. So these would be principles like nafs, the self or the ego, which we ought to discipline, and sabr, patience, which we ought to inculcate. This is effectively just telling you to have a low time preference, right? And I don't think it's much of a surprise either if you consider that these ethics evolved around the prevalence of gold coinage and a mercantile system that was heavily dependent on reputation. I also don't think it's much of a stretch at all to say that the Islamic economic model is finance as it would be on sound money. I think this helpfully and naturally bridges the divide between the financial and the ethical. The primary ethical consideration that sound money imposes is responsibility. There's no lender of last resort. There's no monetization. You have to take responsibility for your actions, and you have to try to provide real value in use. And perhaps more, I guess, psychologically even than ethically, sound money encourages us to think long-term, which is an argument I'm sure everybody here is more than familiar with. It relieves you from worrying only about your personal and immediate well-being and allows you to care about bigger, more transcendental things, possibly the most important of which would be the well-being of others. And so this quickly goes well beyond the financial and allows us to generate all of the ethical tenets on which Islamic finance rests and the spirit of the law on which it encourages us to judge. Take responsibility for your actions. Encourage others to do the same. Keep your word. Do what you say you will do, and don't say you will do things you don't know you can do. Therefore, be mindful of your reputation. Think and act locally, because that is the only place your reputation can matter and the only thing you can know. And don't take advantage of people. Help them. Be kind. The last thing I'll say before wrapping up is something that I wanted to try to demonstrate rather than dictate. I hope I now have. You do not need to be a Muslim to think that this is how people ought to behave, and that the world would be a better place if everybody did. But, you know, they don't, and everything's shit, and, you know, cry harder, Alan. So I guess where that leads us is the most important question of all. Will Bitcoin fix this? I don't know, because I can't see the future, right? And it would be unethical of me to pretend that I can. But I think if we take responsibility, or enough responsibility, Bitcoin can help us fix this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, so Daniel Prince, are you around? I'm just trying to get you. Oh, there he is. Okay, he is here. Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. So we've got our Q&A session coming up now, and Daniel Prince is going to be our host. So hopefully we are able to get the guest on with the stream, and I'll let Daniel take it from here. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, guys. Check. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alan, if you're still around. Great talk. I'd like to bring up on screen, if we are ready, Abubakar, who's zooming in remotely from, here he is. How are you, brother?
I'm good. How's it going, Prince?
Hang on. Are you on mute, or do we not have sound yet? Give us another test.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We hear you. We hear you. Thanks. Thanks
Awesome.
for coming to Riga via the internet today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Why don't you tell the panel just a little bit about yourself, briefly introduce yourself, and tell us who you are and what you're focusing on in Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Abubakar, like Dan said, and I'm essentially a Nigerian programmer. So I'm a Bitcoin Core contributor. So my time is dedicated to reviewing code, and then in the case that I have patches myself, I push that onto the actual repository itself. And then beyond that, I'm also involved with a project called Gala, along with a few other Bitcoiners, which basically is a program designed to train the next generation of Bitcoin Enlightened developers here in Africa. And then I'm also a board member of Btrust, which the goal there really is to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem initially in Africa and then scale that out as we move on. And then beyond that, I'm also CEO and CTO of Recursive Capital, which is a Bitcoin venture capital firm. And then beyond that, I'd say the minority of my time is spent playing Halo.
And you are how old?
I'm 23.
Blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. So out of all of that, I'm going to ask you a few questions around Btrust. Just in case there's anybody in the audience here today that doesn't know exactly what Btrust is, can you just fill us in what that is and your role there?
Yeah, sure. So Btrust is essentially a fund that was set up as a blind trust by Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z a while back last year, really. And the entire process last year was to get a board set up, which is a 4-person board that includes myself, Carla, Obi and Wosu, which some of you might have seen yesterday on the panel speaking about Fedi, as well as Adroma. Now, the main idea, like I said, is to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem. Now, our view is we start off in somewhere like Africa, given the mix-up of the actual board itself. So when we say growing the space, specifically, we're starting out with a dev focus, because our view is that's the immediate way we could actually provide impact to the space, because the more talented and skilled engineers we have working on these actual repositories around like Bitcoin Core or some of the other projects like BDK, the better overall for the ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, every single project that we're building, whether closed source, open source, all relies on open source technology. And the further down the stack you go to like the base protocol, the more important it is in terms of having talented and skilled engineers working on it. So really for us is to at least grow out that pipeline a bit. So we've started a small team that we're growing, which is the open source team. We have currently a developer there called Vlad, who's working on BDK full-time and is being supported by Btrust. So the idea is to get 2-3 more people on the same team and then have them working on projects in the space. And then down the line, we scale throughout other avenues for us to provide impact to this whole space.
So just to put this into context, you guys have 500 Bitcoin to oversee, is that correct?
Yes.
What kind of talent have you been seeing?
Ooh, tremendous, especially on the continent. Because at the end of the day, Africa is one of those continents where over the years, a lot more of the demographic has shifted towards a lot more young people. So specifically, even in a country like Nigeria, where I'm currently at, in a state, Kaduna, which is where I'm at, we have more than half the population around, the age of below 30. So, and this is growing, so it's not shrinking. So for us, the most impactful thing is, even as just an individual in Nigeria, is to ensure that there's a productive use of this talent that's emerging, which is a lot of these young folks. Because if we have a ton of young folks who are unoccupied, then there's going to be a lot of issues like, security issues, which some states are facing. So for us, really, with BTrust, the idea is to leverage this talent that is abundant and to ensure that it's productively put to use. And what better way to put to use than to build the next generation of monetary finance, really, which is Bitcoin.
Yesterday we had Michael Saylor on one of these interviews, and somebody asked him the question about increasing the adoption in Africa. His answer was to for somebody to crack the code to get a download a Lightning wallet for free on a very cheap phone to interchange between something like a stablecoin and Bitcoin. What would be your thoughts? You're there, boots on the ground. You know what's going on. What's your thoughts on, first of all, that approach and what you see the best approach for adoption in Africa?
That's definitely interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, with Africa and with adoption in general, you don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel in terms of the bottom-up approach of trying to get a lot more people onto these rails. Now, when I say you don't want to reinvent the wheel, I mean specifically if you have an ecosystem that already exists, there are already existing rails in which individuals either onboard or offboard. So the best way really in terms of trying to key into that is to ensure that you're using existing infrastructure to do that onboarding. So to Saylor's point, I think that approach would definitely help a lot. And more on that point really from my end, I think one thing we've noticed is, given the statistics we see around mobile phone penetration and internet adoption increasing year on year, the best strategy right now, given we still aren't at that point where smartphones are ubiquitous yet, is growing. I mean, it's around 40% the last time I checked. So a lot of people are on feature phones. So these are phones that don't necessarily have, all those advanced, features that we have in compute, like iPhones and Android phones, but necessarily all they're based on is USSD codes, which is a huge infrastructure that's already heavily regulated. So in terms of keying in, we have products like Match and Kuro who are really leading that reign. So what they do essentially is allow individuals to buy Bitcoin as well as send down the line using the Lightning Network. So they use LN addresses all via USSD codes. So the idea there is to use the existing infrastructure we have, which is USSD codes, to provide the best experience of Bitcoin, which is through the Lightning Network.
Yeah, all right. Well, I would like to ask whether the crowd at this point have any questions and ask you directly. If there's anybody here that has any questions, please raise your hands. Yes, there's one gentleman down here. If we could get a mic. Yep, great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm very glad to see you, and I'm Ibrahim Tugol. I'm from Mali. I would like to know what is your connection with, because I take from your last point about the USSD code, and because that is now really, Africa is very familiar today with mobile money. And if I take Mali today, all banks together in Mali have less than 3 million clients. Maybe we have about 20, 25 banks, so they are sharing 3 million clients. But if you take the mobile companies, we have 5, they have about 15 million clients. And so people they are all using USSD code. And there are a lot of talent, a lot of startup. What is your relation today with the African university students, startups, which are in the continent working on these mobile digital money sectors and so on, because which are booming, really? And
yeah, great question. I mean,
and what Bitcoin can play there as a role, and how, because they are not working with Bitcoin, but they are working with mobile transactions, mobile money transaction with USSD code, and but Bitcoin level is quite low. Yeah, how you do to make a connection, and how you are cooperating with your peer Africans, young peoples.
Yeah, great question, first of all. So I think to your point, the main thing we're seeing, which is, I guess, the main reason why you would tend to see a lot of people not building Bitcoin infrastructure for USSD codes is because, like I said, it's a heavily regulated space, specifically in terms of the the amount of fees that you pay for each SMS you're sending out using USSD codes, it varies across the continent, with places like Nigeria having extremely absurd rates, relatively speaking, compared to somewhere like, you know, Kenya, where USSD codes are a lot more ubiquitous. So to put that in perspective, in Nigeria, we have a bank switching system called NIBS, one of the most, I guess, efficient, so to speak, relatively speaking, on the continent. Hence why you tend to see a lot of people making a lot of interbank transactions, whereas in a country like Kenya, a lot of those bank transactions happen over USSD codes. Now, with regards to, in general, why or how I think we should proceed is we definitely have to sit down with a lot of these regulators to ensure that we have at least a more reasonable pricing mechanism for these companies to come in and actually be competitive in the space. Because the main reason why we see a lot of high rates is because banks are the ones paying. And frankly, they don't care whether it's high or low. So we have to make sure that it's at a stage where folks can actually afford to innovate on top of that. And then with regards to folks in the universities and all of that, my view is that the best way for us to not only key into that and tap into that talent is for us to ensure that we're running things like hackathons. We're trying to at least get in touch with these faculties to push some of the Bitcoin content at least towards, even if it's not the undergraduate level, maybe the postgraduate level. And then beyond that, ensure that the existing tech hubs, so to speak, are not focused on NFTs, Web3, crypto, fancy stuff, and instead focused on something that's more of a long-term solution, which is Bitcoin. And by doing that, I believe we'll see a lot more people working in this space and building crazy, cool, innovative solutions. So I think that's really how we could push the ball in terms of those fronts.
Great question, thank you. I just want to clear something up. You guys are talking about USSD codes. That's not a shitcoin, by the way. That's right. It can be a little bit
good
tricky.
To clarify.
It's a cellular network. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It's unsubscribed supplementary service data. That's what it stands for.
Right. So it's just the network in which the messages are being sent across. It's not like it's Bitcoin being switched into USSD, which is a stable coin, shitcoin thing in the middle. No, that's not happening at all. It's just Bitcoin to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Any further questions from the audience here that you want to ask at all? All right. Yes, there is one gentleman up the back here.
Hi. Just a question regarding adoption, because you're there. Obviously, you've got the skills to produce the technology that can be adopted. But there's two extremely hard things for me for adopting Bitcoin that I've learned over the years. And one is educating people that Bitcoin is money. And the second thing is how to ride the volatility and still keep the faith in Bitcoin. And the big challenge I see for emerging markets, which you're on the spot for, is the education. What do you think we can do to help people get over those two massive challenges? Because it's one thing to be able to provide the technology to them, but holding on and understanding what it is you're holding and what money is the biggest challenge, I think. And the education generally is not much beyond primary in much of Africa. So the challenge must be even harder than it is for people in the Western world that have got into Bitcoin.
That's definitely a good question and an interesting point of view. I mean, personally, I would say in terms of understanding and capturing truly what Bitcoin from a value point of view provides to individuals here in places like Africa and other emerging markets, I think it's a lot easier for them to grasp than in other developed parts. And I say this because a lot of the education is already happening for us, I guess, on our behalf in terms of the economies and the issues we're facing with regards to high inflation, the food crisis here in Nigeria. So to put it in context, if we're trying to convince folks and I guess highlight the benefits of moving on to Bitcoin or the value in terms of financial freedom that Bitcoin provides to these individuals, they first have to understand that the current system doesn't work, because if it works, there really isn't any sort of compelling reason for them to move to that. And already much of that work is being done by crashing currencies, a lot of failed currency control measures in places like Nigeria, for example. And by that very fact, a lot of people are already feeling the brunt of the current system and are already moving to an alternative like Bitcoin. And that's what we tend to see with regards to adoption in places like Nigeria, because if you notice, it also coincides with kind of the economic hardships that have been going on over the last few years. So for us, really, it's a matter of, first of all, acknowledging the economic, I guess, circumstances in these regions, and then letting people know that there is a viable alternative. And not only that, but at least providing easy to use interfaces. So this goes way beyond applications to actual UX wise in terms of how easy it is to actually buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, and sell Bitcoin. And part of these, I guess, measures that we need to take include a variety of things. So in terms of custody, push them at least to a point where they're able to self-custody, which takes quite a while. So at least we need some sort of middle ground, which I think Fedi is an incredible, I guess, middle ground for us, because it's not on the heavy custodial side, and neither is it fully self-custody. So with solutions like that, we have that on the end in terms of storage. And then with regards to front-facing user applications, we need a lot more of these apps to be a lot more intuitive for people to use, because the biggest convincing factor from what I've seen in terms of adoption is ease of use. And that's the main reason why a lot of people don't use cash and tend to use credit cards, for example. So I think, just to cut it short, what we really have to do in terms of education is, like I said, continue to highlight the issues of the current system, try and ensure that they're aware there's an alternative, and then provide that with the best, I guess, possible way to experience that. And in this case, is usually the Lightning Network. So getting a lot more people building on Lightning is incredible, which companies like BitNob have open source well, not open source, but they provided open access to their APIs for Lightning. And we're seeing a lot more companies actually build and function on top of the Lightning Network, which is incredible for adoption.
How bullish are you, Abubakar, on Bitcoin, on the future, considering what you've seen, the talent that you're interacting with each day?
Yeah, I'm incredibly bullish. I mean, some days I sleep with a huge smile on my face, knowing that at the end of the day, regardless of whether I wake up or I die, I know that there are incredible talents building on this space, and a lot more talent just getting their toes wet in this space. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing the ton of talent that's going to come out of this continent in terms of not only building on the protocol layer with Bitcoin Core, but all the way to, the higher layers in terms of Lightning and user applications. So yeah, there's a ton to look forward to. There are a ton of folks working in this space, and our job really is to facilitate that and to prop it up to a stage where it's very, very easy for a dev to go, hey, I want to be a Bitcoin dev. You can do that. I have talent. I want to contribute something bigger than myself. You can do that. So really, at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin is the one savior for this continent that we've been looking for, that actually provides the middle ground we need to actually become a prosperous continent and to get to a stage where a lot of us have been clamoring for.
Has there been any more news on the political front out of any of the countries over there that you could fill us in on, that we might not be aware of on this side of the world?
Oh yeah, so I mean, in a country like Nigeria, for example, the general elections are coming up for the presidency. So there's a lot of, I guess, moving of the political landscape in terms of uncertainty with regards to maybe the regulation we're going to expect. But our job really is to at least get in contact and start conversations with a lot of these folks that are trying to get the seat, at least that are getting there in terms of the numbers and could get there. So at the end of the day, regardless of what regime is actually in the office, we still have at least good comms in terms of trying to get better regulation for people. And obviously, the main reason for that is if people don't have good reg in terms of getting access to Bitcoin, then it becomes harder for them to gain that access, which kind of destroys the whole idea of mass adoption. So yeah, you definitely be watching out, I guess, with regards to how that unfolds. We're trying our hardest here on this, I guess, on the ground to ensure that it's a smooth transition for a lot of people in terms of how they use Bitcoin day to day. But regardless, that's the main reason why we're building such a resilient system. I mean, at the end of the day, you can still use Bitcoin regardless of what political regime is in office or not.
All right, I've just been given the 2-minute warning by the Master of Ceremonies down here, Stefan Livera himself. So I'll ask you one question. You're going to have to be pretty quick on your feet with it. But if you had one last orange pill to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Oof, that is definitely really hard. I mean, since I have 2 minutes, let me be a little bit controversial. Maybe I'd say the CBN governor in Nigeria, because it's not too bullish. So hopefully if we're able to orange pill him, then we can get that CBN ban reversed and a lot of people will be able to easily innovate in the space.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Abubakar, and I hope everybody feels as bullish as I do when I speak to such young people in the space that are such capable technical abilities that I can only dream of having. So thank you for joining us, everybody. Please, big round of applause for Abubakar. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Have an awesome time, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Daniel and Abubakar. What a great conversation. I think there's a lot of things to be bullish on there. So I think it's just really fascinating to see, and I think it really is a good question as well about the education, not just about Bitcoin, the technology, Bitcoin money, but also dealing with volatility in Bitcoin. That's part of what we deal with in Bitcoin. So next up, we've got an announcement. We're going to have the Hodl CEO back on, Max.
Hi everyone, again. I have a few announcements and that's going to take a lot of your time. So it's regarding our existing lending and trading platforms. So first of all, we have finally released a new beta version of our lending platform with new redesigned functionality and UI and UX. You can already check it actually on testnet. So if you go to land.hodl.com, below there's a link to the testnet. You can go there and you can check the new interfaces for main page and also new interface for offer page. We're going to add new interfaces and new usability pretty soon for other pages as well. Now, sorry. Can you switch to the next slide, please, guys? Something isn't working. Yeah. So same way for Hodl trading. Finally, after 3 years with not updating the interfaces, we're also going to introduce the new version of Hodl trading platform by the end of this year. Going to be super simple, also noob friendly. Not only geeks will use it, hopefully starting from 2023. And the major part about my announcement is a long-awaited thing, which is a doomsday software. So basically, we have promised since last year to release a doomsday software, which is actually allow lender and borrower on our platform to take collateral from the escrow, even if the platform will go down. So as you know, our existing lending platform work with the consensus mechanism 2 out of 3. So every time there's a lending contract created on land.hodl, there's 3 keys distributed between lender, borrower, and platform itself, Hodl. So in case if Hodl by any chance is down, you still will be able to negotiate and you still will be able to release the collateral from the escrow even without platform using a small utility that we're building. So you are not freezed anymore, and we're going to release this in September already. So thank you very much. That was part of my announcement. And I want to invite Bach from Trezor for a second part of announcement.
Hi everyone, thank you again for the invitation up here, Max. My name is Bach, and I'm actually here on behalf of Inviti, the financial service integrator for our sister company, Trezor, under the Satoshilabs umbrella. To keep things brief, since you guys are probably wondering who's that guy and what is he doing on the stage, I'll get right to our joint announcement with Hodl. To give a bit of context, some of you may know today that you can already buy and sell Bitcoin directly from your self-custody of Trezor within the Trezor suite, the web app, and the accompanying desktop application. We've been working hard on to integrate more partners to offer our users more choice, but these have all been centralized exchanges or financial service providers so far. To offer our users with even more choice, we have decided to expand the product options in Suite with a more decentralized option solution. So I'm very happy to announce that as of today, we have started the integration of Hodl P2P listings directly from Trezor Suite. Trezor users will be able to see the offers of P2P directly from the UI, and the users will be able to compare prices that P2P people are offering compared with the centralized exchanges, which might even bring more users, new users with no experience in P2P towards like a more decentralized solution. I hope by making this available to all Trezor users in the near future, we are improving the usability and convenience of the app, and at the same time, we are introducing a more privacy-minded feature to our customers. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for that, and we're off to lunch now, so I'll see you back here at 3:10. Thank you.
Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and me. I got new feelings. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and me. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and me. I got new feelings. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and heat. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and heat. I got new feelings. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and heat. I got new feelings. Time to build a home. All I'm gonna need is your light and heat. I got new feelings.
Last night I had a vision of a disco in the sky. I saw angels and saints dancing together. Like a mystical dream it clouded my mind, but I remembered to move, I remembered that groove. I remembered the thump of the bass and the pump of the kick, because my heart was almost out my body and I felt free, I felt joy, I felt things I never thought I'd feel before. It was deep, it was soulful, it was techno, it was disco, a kaleidoscope of sounds. It was truly underground, it was an essential mix in the clouds where we could dance and sing out loud, and everybody loved everybody else. There was no hurt, there was no sorrow, there was no pain, and like children we danced and we laughed and we played without a care in the world, without a flicker of ceremony of sound in my mind. I must have went to house heaven because nothing's that divine. I wanna find you, love, love. 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 I wanna find you. It was deep, it was soulful, it was techno, it was disco, a kaleidoscope of sounds. It was truly underground. It was an essential mix in the cloud where we could dance and sing out loud, and everybody loved everybody else. There was no hurt, there was no sorrow, there was no pain. And like children, we danced and we laughed and we played without a care in the world, without a flicker of despair. It was all about house music. It was that thing that we shared. I wanna find you, love, love. 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 I wanna find you through the moon. Show me how to move, can you show me how to move and
Watch me bust they shit. Watch me bust they shit. Once again. Once again, Tip. Once again, Tip. Watch me bust they shit. Once again, Tip. Once again. Once again, Tip. Watch me bust they shit, kid. Watch me bust they shit, okay. me bust they shit. Okay.
All right, thanks everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. I definitely had, I enjoyed the beef ribs and the grilled beef. It was fantastic. Now, quick slight change on the schedule. We've actually got an announcement first. So please welcome the CTO of Satoshilabs, the company behind Trezor, Pavel.
Do you hear me? Nice. So hi everyone, my name is Pavel Rusnak and I'm a co-founder of Satoshilabs. Satoshilabs consists of 4 different companies, Trezor, Invity, Tropic Square and Vexel, but this announcement is going to be about Trezor. So you probably know that Trezor is the first hardware wallet, but it was also the first open source hardware wallet. And it's also the first BIP39 wallet, which means that BIP39 is a standard. You probably recognize 12 of 24 words to back up your devices. And this standard is used literally by every hardware and software wallet out there. We are also the first BIP44 wallet, first Shamir backup wallet, first hardware wallet with U2F authentication, first hardware wallet with FIDO2 authentication, SSH login, GPG signing, blah, 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 you name it. So what could probably I'll be announcing today? So I'm happy to announce today that we are joining our forces with the Wasabi wallet to make Trezor the first hardware wallet with on-device conjoin, which it means that Trezor users will be able to participate in Wasabi wallet conjoins and